The healer nodded happily and looked back towards Mount Nightblade. Not worth mentioning, little angel. So before it gets dark, I'm going to look around a bit. I guess up there is a path we need to follow to get to the top of the mountain. I'll take a closer look at it. Maybe I'll find a reference to the House of the Elders. I would also like to get an idea of the stability and safety of the path. It is possible that due to the lack of luminium, some places are in danger of collapsing. Well, I'll see you later, my two bunnies. Don't run away, will you? Hehe. With that, Glaczio passed Cheyenne and Sasha stood up, as did Arukas. It seemed as if the young woman had no objections, and she approached her friend. But the girl was also curious and wanted to accompany the healer. Wait a minute, Glaczio. Can I come along? I'd also like to familiarize a bit with the surroundings. The healer stopped and looked at her over his shoulder out of the corner of his eye. He seemed surprised that Cheyenne wanted to go with him voluntarily. Sasha also seemed a bit confused because, after all, it was actually Glaczio who followed the two friends every step of the way and not the girl herself. I think that came unexpectedly for the two of them, but sitting around here and waiting until I have enough strength and concentration to do magic again wouldn't be right for me. I'd really like to check the way. Something like the Glaczio Mountains should not happen again. Cheyenne tried to clarify the situation a bit. Well, I just mean, I would also like to see for myself, for I see more than two, right? I don't want something like the Glaczio Mountains to happen again. That's actually the only reason I want to come with you, and because I know you wouldn't let me go alone. The healer now seemed to understand and agreed. If that's the case, of course you can accompany me, although it won't do much good because I doubt you can determine how much luminium content the soil has. Even if you could find out, would you know the data or could you calculate it to make a comparison? If you could do that, you would have to factor in weather, time, load, other controls, and all possible probabilities in your calculation to determine the approximate percentage of safety. Don't be mad at me if I tell you this now, but I doubt that you understand much about mathematics and physics, let alone know how to handle them so well that you can calculate all the values in your head without making some mistakes that lead to a falsified result in the end. That's exactly what I find so sad about you. If you had attended a good school, you could do all this, I'm sure. But unfortunately the circumstances were not given. So it wouldn't do much good if you went with me. You'd better listen to the result. You'll be the first to know, because I can deliver 100% correct analysis. This was scientifically proven to me. I even got an award for my intelligence. You can ask Sasha Mouse, hehe. In addition, I sometimes feel when there is a lot or too little luminium in a place than there is in general. It's because I'm a healer and the chosen one at that. But for a brief moment I really thought you wanted to come with me because you can't bear to be without me. Well, it's understandable that the noble princess misses her beautiful hero. She just can't live without him anymore. Cheyenne blushed in the face and gave him the cold shoulder while she raised her head in a faint, arrogant manner. I already said that I would have gone alone, but that has nothing to do with you. But if you want to know exactly, in the past I would have never gone anywhere voluntarily with you, but now I've gotten used to your way and stuff, so it doesn't bother me anymore, and I would have taken advantage of it, but what you just said will probably be true. I really can't calculate that well. But then you really have to tell me the truth. I don't want anything to happen to anyone, but I don't think you do either. The healer tilted his head and grinned as he waited for Cheyenne to look at him again. Little angel, what is supposed to mean, I quote, in the past I would have never gone anywhere voluntarily with you, but now I've gotten used to your way and so on. So it doesn't bother me anymore, Was that an indirect offer of friendship? Cheyenne thought for a moment. She hadn't really meant to imply that, but she thought about possibly accepting. Well, actually, He hasn't done anything stupid since Vakuralis that would have harmed Sasha, Adukas and me. On the contrary, actually he has always helped us wherever he could. But if we are connected by the label friendship, well, friends have to trust each other, but I can't, shouldn't and don't want to do that with him. On the other hand, it would be a sign of my gratitude that he always frees me from dicey situations and somehow we are already something like friends. I'm just going to say yes now, so that he knows that I'd be willing to trust him, and maybe he'll take it so much to heart that he'd have too guilty a conscience to ever harm me in any way again. Well, a guilty conscience and Glaczio don't really go together, but it's worth a try. Maybe I'm thinking about it for nothing. Either way, Sasha will rip my head off. Cheyenne sighed and turned back to Glaczio. She crossed her arms, nodded and smiled defiantly. If you understood it as such, then yes, we are already as good as friends. The only thing that stands in the way of that designation is that I've only seen you as a companion so far, and you know why. But even if we maintain a friendship now, the old conditions still apply, yes? The healer nodded and bowed, skillfully acting, but he seemed to be seriously happy and winked at Cheyenne. It's a real honor for me to welcome you to my circle of friends, little angel. So then, I'll see you later. Glaczio raised his hand in farewell and disappeared behind the rocks. Cheyenne turned to Sasha and Adukas and looked into stunned faces. The young woman's jaw had dropped and she had raised an eyebrow. Adukas raised a paw and stroked his muzzle with it as if he were ashamed. The girl clasped her hands on her hips and tilted her head reproachfully until she realized that it had no effect on the fairy wolf and her best friend. So she lowered her shoulders, sighed, let her arms and head hang, and then shook it slowly. But Cheyenne didn't really want to justify herself, because after all she had known exactly what she was doing. That's why the girl changed the subject. Sasha, stop staring at me like that, yes? I already know what I'm doing, don't worry. You'd better tell me what we're going to do now. I don't really want to sit around here all the time waiting for Glaczio to return. I guess that would be too boring for you too. Sasha sighed as well and Adukas whimpered and dropped to the side. But the young woman trusted Cheyenne and accepted her decision. Well, it's up to you what you do, but I want you. Now he's guaranteed to be even more annoying than ever. But you wanted it that way. I'll keep an eye on him anyway, and you can't trust him too much, but I'm assuming you're aware of that. Well, yes, I don't want to sit around here either, so I'm hungry. How about we go pick some peas? Then I remember that I'm the only one except Adukas who ate something yesterday. Glaczio was with you the whole time, and you slept so long. In the evening I completely forgot to ask you if you want a pear. Unfortunately, that's all that is here. Adukas has caught the rabbit, but I don't really know. I mean, of course we could kill one, but I've never cooked anything in my life, and Glaczio, well, you can imagine that he feels the same way as I do. Yes, and these peas are really not bad. I wouldn't even call them an emergency solution. They taste too good for that. So come on, let's go pick our dinner. Is that a good suggestion or what? Cheyenne nodded and smiled. Then Sasha beckoned her over. Adukas stood up and the three walked back part of the way they had come to get to the pear trees. The young woman raved about the fruits that hung from the branches in yellow and light green. Well, Cheyenne, I'll tell you, those pears will knock your socks off. They're so awesome you won't believe it. We're really lucky that they grow here and we get them completely for free. If there are anywhere near such insanely good fruits on markets at all, they would certainly be insanely expensive. Cheyenne only exchanged a somewhat incredulous look with her fairy wolf trotting at her side. Will I be as enthusiastic about the pears? Pears. We have rarely had any in the house. They are only available on the market in the capital and they are imported. Grandmother always said that these fruits were very rare in Luminastrel anyway. We have quite a lot of apple trees, and near Media Silva I saw many berry bushes, as well as various nut trees. Well, the growth conditions of the fruit are probably better on the respective continent. Now that I think about it, actually I'm not really hungry at all. Funny. Well, maybe it's because I slept so much, but I've been walking around all day today, so I don't really understand it. Sasha said that Glaczio didn't eat anything either. That probably won't be because we are chosen. But I don't understand that. In the past I would have died of hunger. Why am I only changing so much now? Cheyenne sighed softly, but Sasha didn't notice. When they arrived at the pear trees, the young woman climbed on one of them and separated some fruit from the branches. She let it fall down where Cheyenne was already standing and caught them. A small overripe pear that fell by itself landed directly on Aduka's head with a dull sound. He whimpered briefly, then barked in fright and bit the fruit. He sneezed, raised his lips, licked his mouth wildly with his tongue and shook himself, because the taste was obviously not his cup of tea. The two friends laughed and then continued to collect fruit while the fairy wolf moved a little away from the trees. When they had collected enough, Sasha jumped back down to the ground and took half of the fruit from her friend so she didn't have to carry so much. With Adukas at the head, the three companions went back to the rocks. The young woman headed for the lake. Cheyenne, let's wash these pears off a bit. Then they are cleaner and even have an invigorating effect. Cheyenne nodded and followed her friend to the shore. There they both sat down. Adukas drank some water for a moment, then he saw a rabbit and rushed after it. After a short time he had killed it and returned to the two friends with the loot. He lay down in the grass and chewed on the dead animal with relish. Sasha started to dip the pears in the water. I think we've collected enough for everyone, so if the icicle also wants a pear, that wouldn't be a problem, although he could get some himself. Actually, the expression icicle is pretty nasty, considering that his body temperature was involuntarily lowered so much. But I think Sasha calls him that out of a habit and it doesn't seem to bother him much. Nevertheless, I would be really interested in why she always treats him so meanly. I mean, yes, he's a complete idiot, but still, what happened that she hated him so much? Cheyenne also dipped the pear into the water and decided to ask Sasha, but this time she would really make it clear that the answer should be given on a voluntary basis, because Glaczio had already told her to keep her curiosity under control. This was such a situation. Sasha? So, I'm just curious, but I don't want you to give me an answer if you don't want to. You shouldn't feel pressured to make a statement or anything, so I would really be interested to know why you don't like Glaczio at all. He may be exhausting and sometimes say things that he should keep to himself, but still, I think that alone is not enough to hate someone so much. The experiment that allows you to shapeshift is also not a good reason. He told me something about it and said it wasn't his fault, but some idiotic researcher stole his data and I believe him. I guess you know it's true too, but you don't want to admit it or accept it. He confided in me that it sometimes hurts him a lot when you are so mean to him, but he still seems to understand your behavior. So don't get me wrong, I don't want you to be friendly to him now. No, actually he deserves it if we're honest, but still. I'm really sorry that I'm so curious, but I'd just really like to know how childhood friendship can lead to such hatred. You don't have to answer. I would understand. I know that is a sensitive topic. Sasha stared out at the lake and seemed frozen. Then she sighed and looked at the pear in her hand. I understand why you're asking, but it's not so easy to explain. You should know the whole truth. But I told you anyway that I'm going to tell you everything about me, so I guess now is the time to tell you my life story. Sasha put the washed pear next to her and lowered her gaze. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment. Then she began to talk. I was born in the capital, and from then on I lived with my family, consisting of mother, father, aunt, and brother, in a small dilapidated house in the Undercity. I may have seen you before, but I can't remember it. Xava doesn't look familiar to me either. My family didn't even have a field to cultivate, and my father had to make do with underpaid work that even endangered his health. Sometimes he had to clean the upper city and other things like that. Most of the time he worked in the metalsmith's shop, which is now only a ruin in the undercity and had almost no windows, only very small ones that could hardly let in fresh air. You may know them, after all you were once a small child and they liked to play in such places. My father made armor there for the knights' apprentices and lesser knights, whose equipment is not really special, all day without a break. Sometimes also swords and other things for the upper city. The knights let the poor people produce everything unimportant because they know exactly that we always urgently needed money and would accept hard work for it. Besides, they had also put us under pressure. Once I was at my father's blacksmith's shop to pick him up from work. There was such hot, stuffy air in there that I could hardly breathe, and afterwards I had enormous lung pain because there were poisonous gases in the air. The fire was fanned with burnt garbage. I was never surprised when my father had coughing fits at home. He often collapsed because he worked too much and hard, and he went back to work every day because he really wanted to raise money for us and my mother. At some point he didn't come home. I was 4 and sat in front of the house until my aunt brought me in. I asked when Dad was coming home, but she just started crying and my brother came to me and hit me. He has broke 3 fingers full of anger and grief so that I would finally be quiet and never ask again when my father would come home. Then he ran away and I didn't see him again for the rest of the day. My aunt took care of my fingers and explained to me that father no longer has to suffer and is in a better place. His lungs had simply been too damaged in his work in the smithy. I heard that again and again when I overheard mother and him when I couldn't sleep. In any case, from that sad day on my whole life was doomed to failure. My brother took over father's work and he got sick as well. This made him so angry that he started beating me every day and hurting me. My aunt just watched. She didn't want to interfere, for fear that my brother would do something to her. And my mother was already so sick at that time that she couldn't even get up. It got worse and worse with her, but I could never help her and didn't even know what illness she had. At some point she could no longer speak and died in her sleep. I was the first one to notice this, and I then snuggled up to her side in bed all day and cried until I fell asleep from exhaustion. I was woken up by my brother, who dragged me away from mother and yelled at me that he somehow didn't like that I was with her. He was so angry that he tried to drown me, but luckily my aunt intervened when I was already half dead. She took a few blows for it, but I was saved.